One of the things that actually can hold people back from getting to the very senior levels is that they don't take enough risk. Because frankly, businesses are put in place to take risk. You don't launch a new product, you don't buy a company, you don't enter a new market, you don't do it without taking risks. So you don't want risk averse people because if you're risk averse, you're probably not going to grow. So learn how to take risks early when the what should I say, when the outcomes or the mistakes or the things are smaller. So that as you get and more responsibility and your decisions have bigger and bigger impact, you have more skill at it.
Welcome to the Winwire. My guest today is Shellye Archambeau, a trailblazing leader in the tech industry who served on the board at places like Okta, Verizon, and Lineage. She's best known for her remarkable 15-year tenure as CEO of MetricStream, where she orchestrated a massive turnaround through moments of near death. I first heard Shellye's inspiring story on NPR's How I Built This, and was lucky enough to get her on the Winwire. She went from a challenging childhood to becoming one of the first and only Black women to lead a Silicon Valley tech company. In our conversation, we talked about Shellye's pivotal career moments and how she reframed adversity into purpose. She shared insights on taking risks, maintaining crazy ambitious visions despite doubt, and why everyone should have a stint in sales. Without further ado, Shellye Archambeau. Shellye, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I've really been looking forward to this. I've been inspired by your book, Unapologetically Ambitious, for those who haven't read it. And I want to jump right in. For those who don't know, you've been a part of and led organizations at some extremely important companies across your career, from IBM, Blockbuster at one point, LoudCloud/Opsware, which has been chronicled in other books. And then you were CEO of MetricStream for almost 15 years, where you led a huge turnaround. And you've done all this pretty uniquely as a woman of color. Now, before we get into some of the other things I wanted to talk about, I did want to ask you to just summarize a bit about that backstory of how that CEO dream came. And then, of course, in your book, you talk a lot about your upbringing and how your parents' determination and values shaped your early life. For listeners who haven't read it, could you just briefly share a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, what your family was like, how those early experiences influenced the person you are today?
Oh, goodness. Certainly. The best way to really categorize it is I grew up in an environment where it became very clear to me early in life that the odds just weren't in my favor, Michael. I went to elementary school and then to middle school. They're talking the 60s and 70s, which was a time when a lot of was going on around civil rights. But for just as many people that felt there should be civil rights, there were just as many that didn't. And as a little Black girl being moved all over the country, my father didn't have a college degree, so he kept moving to get better jobs, support his family of 4 kids, the whole bit. I was always that new kid in school. We moved to a lot of places that had good schools, but very little diversity. And so as a result, I was one of the onlys many times, and I took the brunt of it. I was bullied, I got beat up, and all of that taught me that, the odds aren't in my favor. But when I'd come home and, complain to my mom, this happened to me, or they did this to me, or they said that to me, or they hurt me, or whatever it was, I'd say it's not fair. And her big message to me was, Shellye, life's not fair. And it's like, what? It's supposed to be fair. When you're a kid, you get a lollipop, I get a lollipop. You get a turn, I get a turn. It's fair. No, it was very clear in my house that life isn't fair. So what are you going to do about it? And it was like, oh, okay. And then combine that message with the message of you can't control what people say to you because they said some terrible things. You can't control what people do to you. They did some terrible things to me. But you can control how you respond. And therefore, don't let them win. And don't let them win meant don't let them affect how you feel about yourself or what you want to do in life. Because if you let them affect that or change that or stop you from something or make you feel bad about yourself, then they've won. Don't let them win. So all of that really made me a very intentional person. And so being intentional meant I figured out, okay, if I wanted to do something and the odds are in my favor, then I got to figure out, how do I improve my odds? What can I do to make it more likely that this will happen or that will happen? And so that made me really, really focused. And fast forward, when I was in high school, I had that junior year conversation with the guidance counselor. Everybody has who's going to college. Okay, are you going to college? Yes, because that's what it was in my family. Good grades, go to college to get a job. And she said, well, what do you want to do after college? And I was like, I don't know. I just want to make enough money to eat out in restaurants, keep my thermostat at 72 degrees in the wintertime, and travel. And she laughed and then realized that I was dead serious. So she said, well, what do you like to do? And here's where I credit her. I said, well, that's easy. Clubs. I'm in everything. American Field Service, French Club, National Honor Society. I'm even a Girl Scout, but like, don't tell anybody, right? Because that's not cool. And I like to lead them. And she said, well, you know, clubs are like business. You pull people together and get things done. And I said, oh, okay, now I've got a goal. I'm going to go into business and I like running clubs. So I'll go run a business. And when I looked up, those people were called CEOs. So I said, at 17, I'm going to be a CEO. And that's where the goal came from. I just literally picked it because did I know what that really meant? No.
No,
But I had a
and
goal.
naturally there were plenty of other paths that you could have pursued to achieve some of those very same basic goals that you mentioned originally around traveling and making enough money. Um, and then, of course, my opinion, that goal became a North Star for you. It's something that's really clear. Now, there is one thing that I, found myself thinking about throughout the book. One of those was, you're someone who talks a lot about, here's how you should react to things. Here's how you can respond to things. Of course, that's easier said than done, is what I found myself thinking. Of course, I think a lot of people would kind of challenge you with that. How do you balance that and advise other people to kind of shut out the emotional side, even though that's obviously a natural part of being human?
Yeah. It's not so much shut out because I don't think you can shut it out. What I learned to do was to reframe. So when people said to me, oh, I can give you, even to this day, oh, you're on the board of Verizon? Oh, it's great that they're focused on diversity. Now, what do you think they mean by that? Right? They wouldn't have said that to you, Michael, right? But they would say that to me. So obviously they're trying to say, oh, well, you're probably just on the board because you are a diverse candidate. So therefore the bar's lower. You can put all these different meanings into it. So I could absorb it like that, right? Which frankly doesn't help. But the better thing to do is to reframe it. Why would they say something like that? Why would they say that? Well, probably because maybe they're just a little, maybe jealous, maybe a little insecure that I got that and they didn't. So they want to make me feel bad about what I have. So instead, when people say stuff like that to me, in my own head, I reframe it and think, you poor person, you are so insecure that you have to try to make me feel badly for something I've achieved, right? So when they say that, I don't absorb it as this negativity to me. I hear it as, I feel badly for you. Okay? So it's reframing because if you don't reframe, it's hard to just say, okay, don't feel bad. Okay, don't feel bad. Okay, don't feel bad. Right? That doesn't work, right? You can't shut that emotion out. But if you can reframe it and put a reason behind it, because frankly, when people say things to put you down or make you feel bad, they're typically doing it to make themselves feel better, right? That's the bottom line. So don't absorb it. Realize it for what it is. And when you reframe it, you can handle it.
Yeah, no, naturally. And I think we could all probably take a lesson from that. I think relatedly, one thing I really noticed was this trend. I don't know, maybe the way I'd put it is saying no seems to be something that's kind of easy for you or easier for you than it is for most people. And I'd say that was a trend I noticed where, your family doubted your marriage choice initially. You had a lot of discipline to stay headstrong on your CEO goals. Ben Horowitz, in the foreword of your book, even told you to stay away from MetricStream, the company you ended up joining and becoming a CEO of. You sacrificed your salary in 2008, 2009. So people were constantly telling you, giving you advice, and you were saying no. And I point that out because it's something that's hard for me sometimes to say no, and for a lot of people as well. I wanted to ask you how you do that so easily or how you think about that. And then number two, sometimes I feel like opportunities aren't really in plain sight. It's how do you make sure you're not closing off doors to serendipity or opportunities when you do say no to things?
Yes. So I'm actually going to position a little differently because when you gave those examples, I didn't say no when I decided to marry the man that nobody wanted me to marry. I actually decided to say yes, right, to myself. I didn't say no when Ben told me not to take the job. I actually decided to say yes to myself. So I'm actually not saying no. That's a different topic. What I am doing, though, and trust me, it's really hard. It is not easy, is I'm betting on me, right? That's all those stories, I'm betting on me. And what it comes down to is nobody knows me better than I know me. No, nobody does. And so advice is important to hear because you want to learn from it, get the perspectives, et cetera. But realize when people are giving you advice, they're giving you advice based upon their experience, their known world, and what they know about you, which frankly, depending on who it is, could be very little. Sometimes it can be a lot, but it's never as much as you know about yourself. And so the big piece is to know who you are, and it's okay to bet on yourself. But you have to be clear about what you're doing and why you're doing it. If you're not clear on what you're doing and why you're doing it, don't take the bet. Wait until you do know what and why, and then take all the other information. But at the end of the day, you have to decide because you're the only one that can execute it, and you're the only one who's going to live with that decision.
That's fair. And I think you're clearly opening yourself to be wrong in those situations too and make mistakes. That's the reality. You're fortunately someone who seems to have been right more than they've been wrong, and that's a skill in itself. But there's a behavioral economist that I really like these days, young guy named Adam Mastriani, and one of the kind of essays he wrote recently was about how humans are notoriously bad at taking lessons from other people. We almost need to touch the hot stove, right? Is like the simplest way to, distill that. But he talks about how it's like empirically true that we just are so bad at listening to other people and understanding their experience they have. Now, I'm sure there were a few times where you did have to touch the hot stove and made some of those mistakes. Are there any specific ones you can kind of point out and what you learned from them?
Oh gosh. Yes. The answer is yes. You make so many mistakes in terms of along the way and having to touch the hot stove. So I'll give one in business, Metric Stream. We were building Metric Stream. We realized that when we got to the chief risk officer, chief compliance officer, we tended to win. But as a software sales company, getting to that level was really hard. So we decided, all right, let's start a consulting arm that would have those relationships that we could then bring things together and talk to people about it. And indeed got some views that, it's very hard for a software company to do that because it's so different, et cetera. And you don't have the right, blah, blah. You can do it. Only a few examples of where it succeeded, but it's really very hard. Fine. We did it anyway. And you know what? We failed miserably. Had to close it down. It didn't work, right? It didn't work. So the answer is yes. You don't always make the right decision, even though when you go back and look at it, did I have people who told me or gave me good advice? The answer was yes. Why didn't I listen to it? Because, I thought we were a little different, thought we knew things a little bit better, right, et cetera. And it turns out you didn't. So yes, you're going to make mistakes. The key is when you make them, realize it, make the change, correct the action, but do it quickly. Once you make a mistake, don't try to hang on to it. Just prove that you were actually right, just for purposes of being right. That, to me, that's the worst. Then you live with mistakes for so long. Make a mistake, realize it, shut it down, and move
that is
on.
the challenging balance, of course, of not wanting to just purely take advice and say we're never different, because then you're never going to do anything unique or new.
Exactly.
And I think you clearly had to make a lot of those mistakes and not be right to kind of get where you got to today. And you mentioned in your book how you saw your mother make a lot of sacrifices, and you kind of learned from that success comes from consciously choosing what matters most and making trade-offs to achieve your goals. Looking back, what is the biggest sacrifice you made to reach your goals that you don't regret? And then are there any kind of sacrifices you made along the way that you wish you hadn't made in retrospect?
So I'm going to clarify a language again, because to me, words matter. So I actually don't like the word sacrifice. And I don't like sacrifice because I see sacrifice as something that you do completely for someone else, right? Whenever it is, I'm sacrificing this for somebody else. And when you sacrifice for someone else, you actually are putting so much burden on them. Because if I did this just for you, Michael, then even though you say thank you, I'm thinking, thank you? all I get is a thank you. I just, whatever, gave up all of this, or I just did all of that. And all I get is a thank you. You can almost never be grateful enough when I've sacrificed, right, for you. So I think it's important that you make trade offs because trade offs you own, they're your decisions and you make them. And therefore you live with them, good, bad, ugly. And you don't need others to actually validate right there. And so you're not putting pressure on other people. So trade offs. So, gosh, trade offs. Probably one of the, I mean, a lot of trade offs. Picking up my family and moving the entire family to Tokyo, Japan, where nobody spoke the language. My kids are in school, right? All of a sudden, they're in an international school. My spouse, late husband at the time, he's over there as an expat spouse when just about everybody else is a woman as an expat spouse, not a man. And so he's going to flower arranging classes and all the things they have for them, right? Not necessarily his cup of tea. I mean, we made this huge change, left families, the whole bit. But it was a great opportunity for me. And it turned out it was a great opportunity for them too. Everybody looks back on that in terms of fondly, but that was hard. I commuted for 3 years from Dallas, Texas to Silicon Valley when my daughter was in high school and my son was in middle school, left my late husband there to manage the fort Monday through Friday. I flew back and forth on weekends. That was really hard. When I look back on it, it's a tough one because I did, as a result, go through and have some challenges with my relationship with my daughter, which I also talk about in the book in terms of through that overall period. So you can look back and say, gosh, do I wish I hadn't done it? Well, it's hard. If I hadn't done it, I wouldn't have gotten the job at Metric Stream. So, and we wouldn't have moved to California and we wouldn't actually be where we are now as a family and life. And now I have a good relationship with my daughter, right? We worked through that hard period. We both learned. So it's hard for me to say what I would change because I honestly believe that the hard things we go through, the challenges we have to deal with, the traumas, the tragedies, all of that, of which I've had my fair share, but they all shape who we are and they all lead to where we are now. And where I am now, I'm overall happy with. So I wouldn't change anything. Could I have ended up in a better place? Maybe. Could I end up in the worst place? Maybe. I'm okay being where I am. So if I had to go through all those things to be here, then that was the right set of choices.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think maybe we tend to want to avoid discomfort in a lot of ways and avoid those challenges. They're going to come along the way, whether it's personal dissatisfaction.
They are. Yeah, they are. But you know what? The other thing is, again, it's framing. When you feel discomfort, right? It typically means that you're going through something that you are learning from. The reason you are uncomfortable is because you're facing something unknown. You're facing something you don't know how to deal with, right? You're facing something that you just haven't done or faced before. And so it's uncomfortable and it's challenging. But when that happens, you're actually learning. You are growing. So I tell people all the time, if you haven't been uncomfortable, like in 30 days, then you need to find something more to challenge yourself. You either need more responsibilities, you take on something new, but because life is about growing and developing. And if you aren't doing that, it's almost like, it's like a car, right? As long as you're running the engine and it's actually moving, you're moving forward. But as soon as you stop actually moving, you're probably going backwards. So you want to keep learning. So embrace being uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's a constant struggle, naturally, to really want to seek that out.
Yeah.
Speaking of, being uncomfortable and challenging yourself, one area that I thought was interesting that you've mentioned before is having intentionally sought out sales experiences early in your career. And a lot of our listeners are sellers or sales leaders. And I know that played a pivotal role in your leadership journey and journey to be a CEO. I think a lot of aspiring executives think that maybe that's below them, right? There's a kind of perception sales might be below some people. What did you learn from your sales days that became a core part of your leadership philosophy as you advanced?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right about people looking down on sales folks. I graduated from Wharton and I joined IBM to sell computers. Nobody else in my class did that. And they thought I was crazy. You're what? You're supposed to go to like be investment banker, international, financial analyst, to P&G, product manager, something sexy, cool, sales. But I tell people all the time, I think everyone should do a stint in sales. And the reason is I use more of the skills that I learned in sales today than any other role I've had. Because in sales, what you learn is, number one, no is not a no. It just means something's not right. Price isn't right. Value proposition's not right. Understanding, timing, right? Something's not right. Well, if you look at no as being something's not right, then you can figure out what's not right. Fix it, change it so that you get to an overall yes. You learn how to create win-win environments where you benefit, the other people benefit. You learn how to read a room, look for power. You learn how to communicate effectively. You learn how to ask questions. You learn how to ask for what you want. You learn, on and on and on, right? How to present your ideas, how to build coalitions, how to get support. All of those things we need in every job we have. And I'm a big believer that sales builds a phenomenal foundation. And oh, by the way, if you're really good at it, it's a wonderful career in the long term as well.
You never need to move up even necessarily, and you can really make a great career out of it. Are there any, it's been a long time. Are there any specific customer interactions that you remember, whether it's even back then or at Metric Stream or deals that, you can remember that really taught you a critical lesson or unlocked something for you?
Oh, gosh. The critical lessons come from being uncomfortable. So no, when you close the deal, when you get the order, to remember those. You remember those, but it's more superficially. The ones that you really remember were the hard ones, right? And I remember this one time, again, this is at Metric Stream. We had a really bad customer situation. Our implementation, we let the customer down. They were planning on doing a new order, and now they were looking at pulling back on that new order. So I'm coming in as CEO, and the customer is really unhappy. And I'm going in with my delivery leader, the one who would let people down, right, the whole bit, and we're going in for this call. So the first thing when I walked in to meet the customer and did the hi, I'm Shellye Archambeau, did the hi and the greeting, first thing I said was, I am so sorry. I said, you have to be so disappointed in us. We made a commitment. We didn't deliver on it. I know that made you look bad. That was not our intention. I basically told him everything he was feeling. And what that did was, he now can only say, right. Because I've told him everything. And I said, so I'm here so that we can figure out how we fix this. How do we get us back on track? How do I help you build back your credibility? How to da-da-da-da-da, because this is what I want to. So what I did was I walked in, and instead of being an adversary, I'm on this side of the table, he's on that side of the table. I walked in, I acknowledged everything that I thought he was feeling, and then I talked about how we do something. And next thing you know, I'm on the same side of the table as he is. And now we're talking to my service leader. They're on the other side of the table, which is okay. Somebody has to be on the other side. But I needed to get myself on his side so that we were a team working towards something. We saved that account. We got the new order. We got it all done. Those are the interactions that I remember. It's the hard ones.
It's interesting. I saw some kind of comic one time. I don't know if it's like an educational comic of sorts. And it was sort of like the two modes of fighting. And one of them is like two people, across from each other, yelling at each other, considering each other the problem. And then the kind of the better solution in a way is, two people standing next to each other, looking at a little blob and saying the problem, right? We're on the same side and we're both really mad at this problem that's kind of amorphous elsewhere. And that's exactly what you're saying basically is like, how do you make sure that they realize, hey, you're just as mad about the problem as they are, you're on their side. And I think that's a lesson that's applicable to anything, and especially selling and customer relationships, which is like, get everyone fired up about the problem that we're all going after, and how do we go collaborate on that?
Exactly.
Now, I know, when you and I first met, we talked about some other experiences and stories that really made your career, changed your approach. You mentioned a big risk you took early in your career at IBM with a new product. Can you take us back to that moment and share what you learned from that experience of, basically volunteering for something and really changing your own career in the process?
Yeah, so I was at IBM, and IBM a lot of times had new initiatives, and they always had interesting names. So the current new initiative was something called mass customization. And mass customization is supposed to take our products that we create, obviously in mass, but figure out how we customize it for the final delivery to customers. So customers feel like they're getting something unique and special. All right. Everything is mass customization. Big presentations, we're getting into the world of mass customization. My boss, the vice president of our division, he's like, okay, we have to have a mass customization strategy. All right. So I need somebody to lead it. And I raised my hand. Now, did I know anything about mass customization? Nope. But I figured nobody else does either, right? I think this is brand new. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And in doing that, well, what do you do? Well, the first thing I did was to go figure out who are all these people that are sending out all these presentations and doing stuff and writing papers. Let me reach out to them so I can learn. And so I reached out to people. And it turned out most people had about 10 more minutes of experience than I had, right? This mass customization. But as I learned things, every time I talked to people, I created a distribution list. I then send what I learned to everybody else that I've been talking to. And so that way I wanted them to share with me. So I thought if I was proactive by sharing, they'd share with me. And you know what? That did work. Anyway, the interesting thing that happened was literally in a matter of just a few months, I was viewed as one of these experts in mass customization, mainly because I was driving the communication. Now, I was able to indeed put together a strategy, got some resource, we got some things done. Boss was thrilled. But one of the things that it did for me by taking that risk, because frankly, when you do something new, especially a new initiative, I mean, it may last, it may fade, right? It may fail. There's no guarantees at all. Is it raised my visibility? And I ended up getting put on a task force as the only non-executive on a task force that was led by basically direct reports to the CEO at IBM. There were about 7 people on this task force, and I was one of them. The next job I ended up getting was the job that set me up for my executive job. So I tell people all the time, take risks. Did I know anything about mass customization? No. But you know what? If you think about it, you always figure it out. So give yourself the benefit of the doubt. And that's what I mean by betting on yourself. Anybody else who raised their hand, they were going to have to do the same thing. So you might as well do it. Get the learnings, be uncomfortable, right? And then who knows where things can go.
Yeah. What I always, say to people is, as a company gets bigger, there are fewer and fewer people who seem to want to become firefighters, right? It's just simply too much risk to do something. So you might as well just kind of stay the course because you don't want to become associated with a failed project and kind of stick your neck out there. And I think there's a kind of a unique advantage arbitrage in a way of being willing to say, you know what, I don't really care how I come out of this thing. I'm just going to give it my best.
Yeah, I firmly believe that risk and reward, risk and opportunities are two sides of the same coin. And I will also tell you, I serve on public boards. One of the, you can call it a skill set, you can call it an attribute, but one of the things that actually can hold people back from getting to the very senior levels is that they don't take enough risk. Because frankly, businesses are put in place to take risk. You don't launch a new product, you don't buy a company, you don't enter a new market, you don't do it without taking risks. So people don't want CEOs of companies or senior leaders of divisions you don't want risk averse people, because if you're risk averse, you're probably not going to grow and have the opportunities to deliver outsized returns to shareholders. So learn how to take risks early when the outcomes or the mistakes or the things are smaller, so that as you get and more responsibility and your decisions have bigger and bigger impact, you have more skill at it, you're more capable, and then hopefully, therefore, your risk of bad outcomes will be much lower.
And I mean, speaking of taking risks and making these big decisions about careers, after you left IBM, you took risks on earlier stage companies and had to reframe your path to becoming CEO. Of course, you have your stint Blockbuster, which I'm sure a lot of people that you can write a lot of stories about that too. You took a pay cut to save MetricStream during the 2008-2009 financial crash. I think a lot of people are navigating what they perceive to be a pretty uncertain market right now, feeling a little bit more unsure of themselves than they might have a few years ago. Based on everything that you've done, how do you advise people navigating these times and having to reframe their conception of what they should do to build a great career and what they need to be doing now?
Sure. I will tell you what you need to do to build a great career. It's still the same. And what you need to do to build a great career is make sure that you are constantly building your skills, especially in areas that are in high demand. Ensure that you are a good teammate. And a good teammate doesn't mean you're nice to people. This is right. It's nice to be nice, but that in itself is not sufficient. It means that you're someone that others can count on, that you do what you say you're going to do. You communicate effectively with other people, and people want to work with you. And then next, you want to be the person who solves problems. At the end of the day, people want to hire folks to work for them that are going to solve problems. Because if they're not solving problems, then the manager has to solve the problem. So if you can focus on those things, building key skills, being a good teammate, right? Getting things done that you say you're going to do, and then also solving problems, people need that all the time, everywhere, no matter what's going on with the economy. So
But
focus
even in
on
the
those
short term,
elements.
it's interesting. I think a lot of people are uncertain whether they should jump or not. There aren't that many kind of ports in the storm, I guess I would say right now, where you're saying this is definitely a great place. You know, you're at IBM for 15 years, saying, you know, I think this company is pretty good. You know, it's going to be pretty stable for me. And thinking about, should I go elsewhere? And, you know, you've made that decision before for yourself of like, this isn't the right place. How do you evaluate that, you know, kind of decision?
Yeah, it's funny. One of the things I say a lot is don't run from a problem, run to an opportunity. So just because you've decided that, okay, this is not the place for me, doesn't mean you take the first thing that comes along to get out of it. That's what I mean by running from a problem, because you could run to something that's much worse. Once you've made the decision, okay, be intentional. Figure out, all right, what do I want? Right? Whether it's a job, industry, company, et cetera, do the research, figure out your targets, go after, but keep doing the job you've got. Then go after something thoughtfully. So, yes, if you're in an environment that it's not working for you, maybe it's toxic, or you are just completely stagnant, you are not growing, and no one seems to be interested in helping you to grow or develop, et cetera, then all right, look for something new, but do your work. Make sure you're not jumping into something that's worse. Because you're right, there aren't, quote, safe havens. But frankly, no company is a safe haven, no matter what's going on in the economy. And as long as you have skills that are in demand, you'll be able to be employed.
Yeah, and to your point, you will make mistakes probably in some of those decisions, and you'll hopefully know when to cut bait.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yes.
You know, there's one thing that I was thinking throughout as well of, you know, I think you're someone who clearly likes to challenge certain pieces of conventional wisdom. And you know, you've obviously gone against the grain and challenged the status quo, even by nature of being a woman of color in the CEO role and in the tech industry. You know, beyond the obvious, are there any, you know, pieces of conventional wisdom that exist today that you think are wrong?
Okay. So one of the ones I talk about are people are always telling you to work on your weaknesses, right? When you get reviews, et cetera, here are your weaknesses, work on your weaknesses. Well, frankly, I think that's wrong. I think it's more important to actually strengthen your strengths. Now, your weaknesses need to be at par. They cannot be detractors, right? Just at par. But trying to get a weakness that you have to be strong is going to take an enormous amount of time and energy. I mean, think about piano. All right, today, I'm weak in piano. Fine. To me, become good at piano, it's going to take hours and hours and hours and hours. And then maybe I'll get okay at piano. I'm never going to be great at piano. Well, if I look at this in the workplace, if I took those same hours and hours and hours, and instead of just getting from okay, you know, not very good to okay, I took that same and applied it to a skill that I'm actually good at, I can then take what I'm good at and make it amazingly strong because I'm already good. So hours and hours and hours to make it even stronger. And if you think about it, people hire you. They reach out to you. They include you and want you to be part of their team because of your strengths. They say, oh, let's get Shellye. She's a good leader, good communicator. She can analyze, blah, blah, blah. They don't say, oh, let's get Shellye because she's okay at spreadsheets. And she does, you know, a pretty decent job in terms of, you know, whatever it might be. That's not why they pick you. They pick you because of your strengths. So the stronger you are and the better you are at them, the more you will shine in those particular areas. So spend the extra time, strengthen your strengths. Make sure your weakness is at par. They cannot be detractors. But after that, keep
No,
layering on those
I love
strengths.
hearing about, people's contrarian views, that they think, they've needed to challenge throughout their career. And obviously by writing your book, you probably put a lot of those on paper already, which is great. Of course, the title of your book is unapologetically ambitious, which, carries an implication that ambition can be seen as a negative trait, especially for women, especially for minorities. Have you received any
Yep.
controversial feedback about anything in the book or about your philosophies?
Oh, interesting. So, I mean, yes, there are always people that don't necessarily agree in terms of with what I've said. The reason I titled the book "Unapologetically Ambitious" was, frankly, just because of what you said, Michael. Throughout my career, at times I heard, "Oh, she's ambitious," or "You're ambitious," and it wasn't meant as a compliment. And I saw that being directed to a lot of other people, typically women or people of color. And it's like, no, wait a minute. What is ambition? I mean, you would never raise your child and say, work hard, get good grades, take on extracurricular activities, be a good sport, show leadership capabilities, blah, blah. Oh, but don't be ambitious. Will we ever say that? No. Okay. To me, being ambitious just means there is something in the future that you are working toward. Everybody should be ambitious. Being ambitious doesn't mean that you're going to take no prisoners, step on people, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's just being rude. Okay. So, and it's fine to be ambitious, fine to have something that you're working toward, hence the title. Now, in terms of feedback that people have, the good news is the vast majority of feedback has actually been positive. But yes, there are people that absolutely take issue with things that I've done. There are folks that saw that some of the trade offs I made, they wouldn't have made. And that's okay. You're you and I'm me. I didn't share the book to say, this is how you should live. I shared the book to share the thought processes, some of the strategies, some of the tactics, ways in which you can also leverage to be intentional and improve your own odds. That's why I wrote the book, not because I think everybody should be a CEO.
And I think more and more, I don't know, maybe it's the proliferation of the internet and seeing people's lives in greater detail. There's an increasing perception that someone saying that they do something or made certain choices inherently invalidates other choices or is saying this is the right way. People actually respond quite negatively to that, saying, well, actually, you're considering these people who might not have this ability. And you're saying, like, I'm just sharing my own story. I'm not saying you need to do something or don't. And, maybe someone comes away from your book saying, I'm really glad I read that. I don't want that. And now I know what I don't want, or now I have a better framework of understanding what I do and don't want.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Well, just to close out here, I mean, I've been having a great time, but, we always like to give our guests, the opportunity to talk about a few mentors of theirs, specifically who had a huge impact on them. I know mentorship is something you are extremely passionate about and something you're investing a lot at this point in your career as well, but you also had your fair share of mentors and learned a lot about mentorship throughout. Would love if you could share, one or two mentors that really, or even more, that had a major impact on you and what specifically you learned from them.
Absolutely. So probably the first big learning was from a woman. I was at IBM. Actually, I was part-time. I wasn't even full-time yet. And I attended this meeting, sales meeting. And they were giving out awards. And this woman got an award for like $10,000, which back in the early 80s was a lot of money. And I thought, oh my God, I'm a poor struggling college student. What did you do? So I went up and congratulated her. And I said, how did you do it? She said, when you have a chance, right after the meeting, come see me. And what she shared with me was she said, Shellye, a lot of people, there must have been 300 people in the meeting. All these people, well, at least most of them are working hard, but not everybody gets recognized. She goes, in order to get recognized, people need to know what you're doing. And the way you let people know what you're doing is you involve them. I invited my manager to go on calls with me. I shared when I had challenges. I pulled in specialists. I did bringing all those people in. People knew the amount of work and effort. And therefore, when it came time to put out awards, folks had something to say. Make sure people know what you're doing. Learn that early. Second was Roland Harris. IBM, I'm now full-time at IBM, probably 4 or 5 years in, and IBM decided they wanted their high potential people to have mentors. And they let us choose who you wanted it to be. And I picked a guy named Roland, a couple levels above me. I knew him. I thought he liked me. Perfect. Except I get a call several days later. Shellye. Hi, Roland. Shellye, you put me down to be your mentor. And I said, well, yeah, Roland, I thought you liked me. He said, Shellye, you've got me. Go get somebody else. And I thought, what? So this whole mentor-mentee thing doesn't have to be formal. I didn't know he considered himself to be a mentor. And 2, he told me to go get another one. I could have as many as I wanted. And so literally for the rest of my career, I adopted mentors all over the place. And then probably the third one I'll share was Bill Campbell. Bill Campbell was a mentor of mine. I met him when I was at Loud Cloud running sales. He was on the board. And then afterwards, when I became CEO, he became a mentor. And I tell you, Bill, I learned a lot from. Everything in terms of both how to structure things, how to work with people, and the importance of letting people know that you actually care about them beyond just the work, the capability, things like that. Bill was an amazing mentor for many years.
Obviously, I think most people are very envious probably of you having had someone like him as a mentor, very, very famous in his own right. But, as you mentioned, everyone you come across in your career, you can learn something from, you can adopt as a mentor in its own right, whether they're above or below you. But, obviously so much to learn from your career, and it's been amazing having you on. I highly recommend your book to everyone. Unapologetically ambitious, and it's been great having you.
Thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate being on the show.
Thanks, as always, for joining us on another episode of The Winwire. We'd appreciate it if you could share it on LinkedIn, Twitter, and rate us or leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Helps others discover the show and join our growing community. Our contact info is in the show notes, including our show email. You can see all episodes at thewinwire.com and in your favorite podcast player. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode.